we have, which is the second largest in terms of allocation, which is education, reskilling. And it's a pleasure that I have VC Karthik today. VC, welcome. How are you?
Thank you. Pleasure to be with you.
So VC, if you could quickly, give us, say, like a 2 minutes introduction of yourself and your company, and then talk through some of, the things that budget has kind of brought out as an opportunity. I know you have a very positive view, but the floor is over to you. Again, VC will keep 10 minutes to your thoughts, and then we'll open it up for 10 more minutes for the audience.
Yeah, thank you, Naveen. So very quick, brief introduction. I am the founder of Buzzworks. Buzzworks is a full stack HR company. So we hire, train, deploy people and across the board. So from loaders in a factory to coders in a software company, we provide contingent staffing to SMB, mid-market and enterprise customers. I think about myself, I'll skip that part. I'm a college dropout. Doesn't make me any sexier, but I've been an entrepreneur for 22 years. I think motorcycling is one of my pet passions. I've seen 1/3 of the world on my motorcycle. I think that will suffice for a 2-minute intro.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think, see, I want to pose a larger question to the audience, and I'll probably just take 5 minutes and throw open the floor post that. See, India is a country of 1.4 billion people. And if you think about it, I think there are 54 participants here. If you think about it, the right kind of people to get for your enterprise, whether you're big, small, or medium, is a challenge, right? So I think I want to set the record straight. India does not suffer from an employment issue, right? Unemployment is being bandied about as a big issue. I think from an employer perspective, employability is the bigger issue, right? So there are enough jobs available. Of course, more jobs can always be created, but for the jobs that are available, there are not enough skilled people to occupy those jobs for one reason or the other, which is why you see this huge rush towards government jobs and, MTechs applying for compounder posts and so on and so forth. So headlines aside, I think employability is the issue that's facing this country right now. And I want to just dwell on sort of three aspects of employment. The first is hire, which is that you hire people for a particular fit. The second is train, which is that you make sure that they're trained for that particular job. And of course, you deploy them in the jobs that they're hired and trained for. I think we've been lazy. At least I, as an industry participant and several of my cohort have been lazy because we sort of focus on the first and the third slot, which is we hire people and then we deploy them. There is very little effort, initiative, infrastructure, commitment to actually training people to be slightly better skilled, upskill them, train them, skill them. There's a big gap, right? So I'll just revert to one headline that you might have caught in the budget, which is that the government has allocated in excess of 100,000 crores for skilling and development under PMKVY this year. PMKVY and a couple of other schemes, but essentially skilling is front and center. I think all of you have heard about it. I just wanted to put that number in perspective. And I wanted to put a twist on that number. Now, if I were an entrepreneur, and if you are an entrepreneur that are trying to play this game, then it's very important to recognize this for what it is, right? So budgets are essentially to tell the public at large how the government is thinking and which direction they're going, right? So skilling is going to be front and center for some time to come. And this is one way to solve for better salaries, better jobs, better skill penetration, and so on and so forth. So I would take a very selfish view as an entrepreneur. I would say, look, there's a 100,000 crore venture capitalist sort of venture capital fund, which is now the government. They're not going to take a stake in my company. They're not going to offer me term sheets that are complicated. They're not going to ask for liquidity preference and so on and so forth. They just have a 100,000 crore fund that I need to take sort of charge of and use to the best possible ability, which means that I need to understand how to deal with these schemes and how to deal with the government in general, right? I think dealing with this particular section requires three things, right? One is that you have to fit what you call RFP criteria, right? So are you the right size? Do you have the right pedigree? Do you have the right provenance? Do you have the right vintage? Do you have the right skills to actually qualify for these schemes? So empanelment becomes the first job. I think the second job becomes compliance, because please understand that this money is not free. it is supposed to flow to the recipients and result in both skill development and consequently employment, which means compliance is front and center. This bears repeating because anything to do with the government in general requires compliance, right? Whether it's your taxes, filing of those taxes, or discharging your statutory liabilities requires a very high degree of compliance. Um, and if large sums of money are involved and new projects are involved, then the radar is obviously higher on compliance because the government wants to make sure that people are not abusing those schemes, people are not taking undue advantage of the largest that's being provided. And the last part, of course, the reason why entrepreneurs in the private sector are hesitant to deal with the government is because of cash flows, right? So you might execute large projects, but the speed of payments definitely could be faster. Of course, if you are an SMB, then there are structures in place to make sure that you get your money paid on time, whether it's the government or whether it's a private. How many of you guys know this? Every client that you're a vendor to, if you're an SMB, at the end of every year, they have to declare that no money is outstanding beyond 90 days to any SMB, right? That's the law. So there are steps afoot, but still, if you're doing large scale projects in skilling, skill tech, employment tech, ed tech, and the government is your customer, then payment delays are to be expected, right? I think I want to end here and sort of throw the floor open for questions, Naveen, just with 2 points. As a result of all these policy initiatives, what I see is that, the moment 100,000 crores get deployed in a particular priority area, entrepreneurs will start clustering around that area, right? There'll be value to be added, there'll be value to be extracted, there'll be value to be driven. So I think a large focus has been edtech thus far. I'll repeat, Aubrey. So I'll repeat. The first point is empowerment, empanelment. The second is compliance, and the third is cash flows. Right. So if you can't get empaneled as a vendor, you can't access these schemes. Right. And if you are not compliant, yeah. Thank you. So sorry. So I see the emergence of skill tech as opposed to ed tech. I know it's a much abused term, but really I see skill tech becoming a large business, a large industry. And that sort of missed everybody's focus and action, right? Everybody just got carried away with general. Skill tech is, I use that word carefully, as a business model. Then edtech is, because skill tech is directly aligned to employment, right? There is no point in skilling somebody if they don't get employed. Now, whether it's with the government support or without the government support. Whereas edtech is concerned with the awarding of certificates and examinations and so on and so forth, right? So it's a much bigger industry in terms of impact. It's a much bigger industry in terms of sort of nation building. I would say that if you're generating employment for people, you are really accelerating the progress of an emerging economy like India to become a developed nation whenever that happens, whether it's 5, 10, 15 years out, but you're playing a part in nation building. I think the last point that I want to make is PMKVY, which is the flagship scheme of the government, which was announced in the budget. If you read the fine print, it's actually version 4. So this scheme has been around for quite some time, right? This is the 4th edition of the scheme. So yes, some work I think needs to be done from both sides. I think private bodies like TiE need to disseminate these schemes, need to disseminate these frameworks a little better. And of course, the government can do a better job of communicating the incentives both at the state and the central level, so that entrepreneurs and industry can take better advantage of what is being offered. Sorry, it was a bit of a long-winded dialogue, but I finished in 10 minutes.
No, thanks, VC. I mean, it was a fantastic view where you'd see the government as a VC fund. No pun intended over there. But my quick questions to you is then, VC, as an entrepreneur, what do I start building today? There was an interesting question actually, where somebody's asking, is there any report on what is exactly skilling? Is it vocational, market, artisanship, manufacturing, logistics? Or do you think the government has laid out all that very clearly and one needs to dig it?
See, this is supposed to be a political commentary, but I can tell you from my interactions with government at different levels, the they're very open to sort of listening to what other ideas that you may have.
Okay.
So I would regard policy as a guideline. I would not regard it as a template. So there are 12 sectors that have focus on, because obviously they represent sort of large amounts of demand and large amounts of value creation in a short time. But there is nothing to prevent entrepreneurs from going back, speaking to these bodies and saying, you know what, I think this sector has merit, and sort of the current policy should also include these particular sectors. So right now it's an open book. I think people are listening and talking on both sides of the table. But of course you have to start somewhere. And these 12 sectors themselves are quite expansive. They're not small, right? So there has been a sort of concerted effort to cover as much ground as possible. But let's say, for example, I'll take your example, right? So handloom is India exports. I don't know if you know this, but India exports 80% of the world's handlooms, right? So if you think that that's a priority sector, if you think that entrepreneurs can add value in that particular sector, then of course, I think both parties are open to dialogue. At least that's the current environment.
I think the focus has also been a lot towards, tribal welfare and tribal education. And I think, we've got a lot many more Ekalavya school schemes this time. So it also, I think there has to be a lot of work from the entrepreneurs' end in understanding what exactly the government wants and what kind of education that they expect that needs to be disseminated. Having said that, I think we have our first question from Jamin. Jamin, ask your question.
Yeah, Naveen, I'll just clarify that point. So, if I take the VC analogy, if I take the venture capitalist analogy, you don't really have to play to that audience, right? So good entrepreneurs will attract a VC. Bad entrepreneurs will chase a VC, right? So I think if I were to take that analogy slightly one step more, I don't know how many people will object to this analogy, but it's just an analogy. If I were to take that analogy one step further, I think entrepreneurs should ask themselves this question, right? The government is subsidizing, kickstarting, enabling, call it what you may, a certain set of things because they believe that these sectors are priority. I think as an entrepreneur, I'll sort of draw a Venn diagram in my head and I will say, look, is this desirable? That's the first question. Can I find clients for my final output, right? The second question is it viable? Do I have the means and do I have the competence? Do I have the pedigree? Do I have the insight to actually make this a success? Whatever that sector is or whatever that project is, right? And I think the last part, which is very important, which is a question the government does not have to answer, but as entrepreneurs, I think we are sort of duty bound to answer that question. Can I run a profitable business around this? Right. So I think those answers should stem from there, rather than saying, look, these schemes are available and, I should jump into tribal welfare. There's nothing wrong in jumping into tribal welfare if you think that, if you think that that is a sector that requires your focus. But do you have a right to win? Can the finished product be bought by somebody else, and can you make money doing it? I think are far more important questions that entrepreneurs need to ask. I think Jaimin is getting all excited and has already put up his hand. Yeah.
Yeah, so as you were talking about the edtech sector, don't you think so that edtech sector has become a bubble as many startups in this area are not actually solving the main problem, but actually focusing on the path of Byju's and leading a lot of investment coming in?
See, this is supposed to be an apolitical sort of session, Jaimin. So if I kind of jump into that debate, I will be accused of armchair commentary. I think the focus that I think entrepreneurs have sort of a world to change, right? So why are we even going in that direction? EdTech is what EdTech is, which is why I'm sort of carving out a separate space called skill tech. I'm not here to criticize anybody. Entrepreneurs by nature need to be optimistic, right? You're an entrepreneur yourself. I think you need to be optimistic. There are other sort of forums for armchair commentary, primary among which are, I think, YouTube sort of comment channels.
Very true. Yeah, Aubrey, ask your question.
Hi, Karthik. Thanks for that. I hope I'm audible because I've had internet issues here at my end. I'm traveling.
Yeah, not an issue.
All right. So, Karthik, thanks so much. Skill tech versus edtech is a very, very good point you're making because, frankly, we are into music education. We are a music tech company. Okay. And quite often in the last 3 years, we were branded as edtech, and I kept saying, no, we are not into edtech. music tech, which category apparently doesn't, I don't know whether it exists, but it does. Skill tech, music tech, there's a lot of application, as you can see, tribal music, tribal education, um, schools, there are n million number of schools that don't even have a music teacher. So skilling in terms of, creating employment for a few million, not thousands, but a few million citizens in India is a viable way forward. What I find is, and remember, I was involved in the skill development process when it started a decade ago. And I found that the government, when they're willing to pay for services, it's very, very a tiny fraction and doesn't make sense for an entrepreneur. You know, the background of government's, payments, processes and stuff like that. How do you marry the two, the opportunity versus, I mean, as an entrepreneur, you need to make sure that we make money. We can't be making losses. Will this enterprise, if we follow the government opportunities that are opened up, could it be a VC funded one or a self-sustaining one?
See, I'll sort of restrict my comments. I think it's a good question. I'll restrict my comments to policy, which is what we're discussing in this forum, right? So the way I look at it is that, which is why I use the VC analogy. Sorry to come back to it repeatedly. The way that you think about these schemes is a subsidy or a Kickstarter. Clearly it's not going to sustain, right? Because please understand that anything that is Kickstarted has a finite time period, right? So 5 years down the line, the government might say, look, this objective is already done. This industry is now mature. So therefore it does not require support, or it does not require incentives, or it does not require subvention of any kind. So that tap is going to get shut off. It's not going to continue in perpetuity. So that sort of window, which is exactly what a venture capitalist does, right? He helps you with growth capital. In this case, the growth capital is subsidy of some kind. So really the business model needs to have, which is why I said you need to create robust business models and say, 10, 20% of this cost, whatever it is going to get subsidized by the government or is going to get kick-started by the government. And I'm going to use that momentum at scale to kind of push my business to the next level. Because otherwise you end up becoming an NGO, right? Then you're completely dependent on the government to sort of finance your efforts. And I have nothing wrong with impact investing, and I have nothing wrong. I mean, I find nothing wrong with impact startups, but I think we are talking sort of more for-profit kind of a mindset here. So I would really look at that particular scheme or that particular development or that particular policy as a Kickstarter for my business and not like a sustenance thing. I don't know if that answered your question.
Folks, can you unmute Aubrey?
Yeah, no, it does. It does partially, but yeah, I don't want to get political, but I've seen a lot of government schemes, and as an entrepreneur, when you look at it as a blitz scaling of, I mean, when an entrepreneur looks at the way forward, one looks at it from the point of view of VC because it's the VC's money that's coming in. I'm not too sure. Karthic, very frankly, we can take it offline, but I'm not too sure that the direction that we're discussing would actually be an enterprise that would be VC funded. It's more like an NGO operating out of subsidies or stuff like that, and that is not what the enterprise that we're building up for.
Without naming names, I can tell you companies in skill tech that have taken advantage. Like I said, PMKVY is version 4, right? So I know companies personally from version 2 and 3 that have taken, and the scheme is to be taken advantage of. There's nothing wrong. If you're taking advantage of a scheme, you're actually helping government initiatives and government policy, right? That has squeezed at least a couple of thousand crores.
Okay.
Right. So that is the size that we're talking about. And unless you are saying, from day one, I only want to be $1 billion in revenue, in which case Godspeed. But sort of couple of thousand crores is not chump change.
Yeah, I think I'd love to talk to you offline. Thank you so much, Karthic. Excellent.
Yeah. So VC, before I get into some of the questions which have been asked, can you kind of have you worked with the government? What are your experiences as an entrepreneur? Give us some idea over there.
See, I think it's also important to split this conversation into two, right? So there are several initiatives happening on the state government level. So I'm sitting out of Maharashtra as we speak, and we have some MOUs with the Maharashtra government. Obviously, they are very keen to promote employment among the local population. There are many schemes available. I can't sit and sort of detail all of them for you right now. These are information dissemination. Yes, the government could definitely do a better job. I am not even trying to argue that point, right? So, but it's up to the entrepreneur, right? We are the hustlers. So I think there are two levels, right? One is sort of an umbrella scheme that operates on a pan-India basis, and on a state-to-state level, there are other schemes that are available. And the beauty about this, Naveen, I'm purposely not getting into it because it's going to be a long conversation. But the beauty of this is that you can sandwich these schemes, which is that you can layer one scheme on top of the other. And in most cases, right, you can layer one scheme on top of the other and gain some serious sort of cost advantages to the service that you're providing, especially when it comes to skill tech and employment. Right? I'll give you one example. So the government of India has a scheme called NAPS, which I think has an intake target of 47 lakhs, if I read the budget correctly. 47 lakh young people. So basically, apprenticeship is something that we lack in India, which Western sort of nations have had a grip on for the past 40 years. And that also affects employability at several levels. The government of Maharashtra has a separate scheme, which provides up to 5,100 rupees per local employee, right? So the person has to have a Maharashtra ID, right? And they encourage it. So the state government knows that this central government scheme is an operation. So technically, theoretically, if you employ a local person in Maharashtra, the state government is giving you a 5,100 sort of discount, not discount, subvention, grant scheme. And the central government is saying, look, because this person is an apprentice for 3 years, statutory dues don't apply, which is 18% of a person's take home. I think the last point is very important, because if you sandwich these schemes, then suddenly local employment becomes a possibility in a state like Maharashtra. It's a problem in Maharashtra, but if you sandwich these schemes, then it becomes a distinct possibility. Everybody goes home happy.
Perfect. And from your own, what to say, structuring from the back end, do you have people who are constantly working with? I mean, how do you build that resource out?
So we have a separate team. Like I said, I think there are 3 parts to it. This question was also asked, so I'll answer that question.
Yeah.
So we have 3 parts to it. Empanelment is painful. Sometimes if you don't checkbox something, that file will get returned. This is a problem. This has been a problem with any government scheme, and that problem continues, right? So that element of bureaucracy is still there, even though the initiatives are very positive. So we have a separate team that handles empanelment, right, and speaks to the stakeholders. Most of these schemes also have a nodal officer who will help you out, who will guide you through the application process, because empanelment, the moment you hear government empanelment, it's a switch off for half of the folks in the private sector, right? So you need to have a team that will navigate this. You need to have a separate team for compliance, because the moment you start doing big projects, then compliance sort of goes up. Now, whether it's a big project or a small project, as entrepreneurs, as it is, we have a bad name throughout the world when it comes to compliance. I think we owe it to ourselves, we owe it to our nation, we owe it to a lot of stakeholders to make sure that Indian entrepreneurs don't have this sort of dabba anymore, right? So I think compliance is, we have a separate team for compliance. And of course, delivery and operations is the core of the service that we provide. So we have a separate team for delivery and operations. But you can, Naveen, all entrepreneurs may not have access. We are also a mid-sized company, mid-market company. So we have the money and we have the people to deploy. Most of you will have to start with yourselves and sort of don these 3 hats and go along and build out teams as we speak. All 3 elements are important. Perfect. Without empanelment, you cannot get to delivery, and without compliance, you really don't want tussles. You don't want the exchequer coming after you just because you sort of forgot to checkbox some things.
Thanks, VC. And how has been your experience with respect to getting money out and payment terms and things like that?
See, payment terms are fairly well defined.
Okay.
Right? I think getting money out becomes an issue if your compliance is not in place.
Got it.
Because then they'll haul you up.
Mm-hmm.
See, we are a low trust society, Naveen, which is why everybody gets up in an airline to get out of the aircraft. There's no reason to do it, right? Your luggage is all going to come at the same time. You don't trust anything. And the feeling is mutual, right? The government doesn't trust us. Okay. Right? We don't trust the government doesn't trust us. I think that trust will take time to build. and you have to be proactive. So if you are compliant and if you passed all the audits, because this is exchequer money coming into your account, there is going to be a certain level of diligence. You have to be prepared for that diligence. And there is the usual delay because somebody is sitting and writing a check, ye file udhar hai, idhar hai. All these are par for the course. See, but that said, I think sometimes we are too hypercritical also of the government, right? That said, if it is defined and if you're an SMB, they don't have an option except of to pay because there's a law around it.
Got
But you have to help them help you. I think I think the expectation that the government is going to behave like a private company is completely unreal because that's not their job and it's not their role.
Got it. Very well said, VC. So any other questions, folks? I think Anil had asked you one questions in terms of, can you see what areas of skill development money is going into? It could be medtech, electronics, robotics.
See, I think I've answered that question, but I'll attempt another sort of clarifying answer. I think that is not important. What is important is the intersection of the business model, right, and your delivery capability. So I'll give you a simple example, right? So all of these things fall under what is called NSQF, National Skills Qualification Framework, which has outlined 32 sort of skills that apply. Now we went to the government and we said, boss, then it has to be a 33rd skill. They said, sure, you submit the curriculum, you submit the pedagogy. If it passes the test, then we'll add it. So it's not really that complicated.
Okay.
I don't know the exact name of the scheme, Vijay, but I can have one of my colleagues sort of drive that through, Navi.
Sure. No, so folks, any questions, please ask it here. What we as TiE do is, we go through the chat after the event and we'll try and answer. And VC do, drop in your email so people can get in touch with you directly. Aubrey, I think has one question.
Yeah. I'll just drop my personal email because I'm not here in an official capacity.
Okay.
Yeah, Aubrey, you have one more question?
Yep.
Karthik.
So anybody, any participant asking 2 questions is 500 rupees a question.
Brilliant. I think
Sorry.
revenue making starts here this session.
Yeah.
Karthik, that 33rd, you mentioned that opportunity you had, you saw no opportunity and you made yourself an opportunity by submitting a 33rd category. The government welcomed it, asked for curriculum pedagogy. How long did it take for that whole process to be completed?
9 months. 9 months.
9 months, right?
It took 9 months. Yeah. So you better be careful because it's going to be effort intensive, right?
Right.
So really, that is why I outlined saying, is it desirable, is it viable, and is it profitable? If it's a niche market and only sort of 500 people are going to be served at the end of this policy change, then maybe the effort is not worth the result. So that's
I think
that's something you have to examine.
Thanks a ton, VC.
Pleasure.